Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Is the EU's vision of inclusion more needed than ever? I'm your chair for this evening, and so wish me luck, please. I have one piece of disappointing news. Our Vice President, Marcia de Cordova, we heard from her office just a short while ago. She's unfortunately unable to attend, clearly some parliamentary business. So she sends her huge apologies, but we still have three other excellent speakers, and I think this is going to be a very stimulating evening. Why are we doing this webinar? Well, the EU was founded on the principle of bringing diverse voices together to find common solutions to shared problems. In the era of Reform UK, Viktor Orban and others, it's clear these values must be actively defended. So in this webinar, hosted by European Movement UK's Diversity Committee, we'll explore how our movement can better reflect the diversity of the population of the UK and hear a range of perspectives on how these issues are playing out today. Our guest speakers will share how, notwithstanding their experiences of heritage, physical and neurological differences, the EU's vision of and commitment to inclusion resonates with them and their life. Speakers, a spot of housekeeping. You can ask your questions to the speakers in the chat from now, and we'll get as many as we can in the Q&A session. When typing your question, please say which speaker the question is for. We'll be bringing up the questions onto the screen during the Q&A session, and this will be just after 7 o'clock, and we'll aim to wrap up the webinar around 7:30. If you cannot put your question in the chat for accessibility reasons, you can email your question to events@European Movement. Please also know this event is being recorded, and we are streaming live right now on YouTube. And the webinar will be available on the European Movement's YouTube channel from tomorrow, and we'll be sending the link round when it's ready. And now I'd like to invite Achi.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what's happening with my camera. So I'm really grateful to the European Movement for inviting me to this webinar this evening. It's really important for me to be here and to talk about the issue we are facing. So this webinar, it's about inclusion. I think the panel we have this evening reflect the inclusion I would like to see. Unfortunately, at a European level, we don't really see this kind of inclusion and diversity within the European Union. The European Commissioner, the President of the European Commission has recognized herself and accepted that the EU does not reflect the society, and she's right, because many of us from ethnic minority background, we are nowhere to be seen within the European Union. It's really concerning, especially post-Brexit. Before Brexit, we saw a few Black faces, ethnic minority faces, but since the Brexit vote, a lot of us really have lost this opportunity to have our voices heard in Brussels. So every time when people ask me whether I think Europe is united in diversity, my answer is always the same. Europe is united in diversity, but in a white diversity, because that's what we see currently. And since Brexit, things have become really worse, I would say, because there is no more relationship between the UK and the EU. So even though we have the European External Action Service in the UK, so when I say there is no relationship, it's not at that level, but I'm talking about our community and the EU, because we have no one physically representing us at a European level. And this is concerning because obviously our voices cannot be heard. We don't see people who look like us and sounds like us. So therefore, many people don't really get involved in EU affairs. I remember when we had the last EU election, a lot of people didn't really know that there was an EU election. An EU election was happening, and those who were aware were simply telling me why would they vote, because nobody really care about the issue that affect us. So there is a serious issue at the EU level. And I think that's the reason why we set up Black Europeans. So what Black European does is to work with the EU Commission, the EU delegation, and the European Parliament liaison in the UK to try to create opportunity for our community to engage with the EU. So far, what we have done, we have um, we have set up the in collaboration with the European um, with the EU delegation. We have set up the EuroMEC, which stands for European Minority Ethnic Citizens. So it's a monitoring network that allowed us to bring a community together to speak to the EU delegation to hear about the issues we are facing post Brexit. But it's only relates to the issue related to our immigration status. But there are other issues that we face which are not being taken into account. So, but that's a very important step is that we have managed to break down the barrier. And I think um, the EU delegation is in the UK is the only, I would say, EU body that has managed to work with an organization from ethnic minority background and set up this kind of a working group, which is supported by the 27 member state. So we can say that progress are being made. So I'm not sure about the over 27 EU countries, but in the UK, I think a significant um, step has we have made a lot of progress. Essentially, that's what I would like to say. We have seen um, the way we are working with the EU delegation is something that has never been done before. We have now in a position where we have a platform where we can bring people from our community to share their experiences and talk with the EU official and work together to address our issues. And the EU delegation has consistently involved us in co-designing workshop event like the EU Citizen Gathering. We are always invited to different meetings to meet with the ambassadors, to meet with different EU diplomats. I've recently been engaged with the French consulate, the German consulate, and the Austrian consulate as well. So a lot of thing has been happening, and that is extremely positive. Now, from the NGO side as well, I think we also getting support. So, for example, from the European movement, that is also positive because tackling systemic racism is not a black issue; it's a human right issue. So it shouldn't be only black people fighting for equality, fighting for inclusion, because we are not the one who are excluding ourselves. So I think we really all need to work together. And for us, Black European, I think we have done what we can do alone, or at least with the EU delegation, but we have pushed the boundary as much as we could. Now we really need a support from white EU citizen to push, a little bit further. Now we're in the room, but we need things to move further. We have, for example, we have the EU anti-racism coordinator now in Brussels. That's great, but the scope of her work is limited only to the 27 countries, not in the UK. So it's good, it's a great positive step, but we need something similar to that in the UK. We would like to have an EU anti-racism coordinator looking after EU citizens outside the UK, but we don't have that. Even though she's in place in Brussels, the issue she's addressing are not the same issue as we face post Brexit in the UK. So I think we really need to understand the issue we are facing. And the other one of our other concern as well is quite often is when we talk about racism, we talk about solution. We are not always included in the solution. Like I said, now we are seeing changes, but when we propose a solution, even if those solutions are being heard, we are we are not at the level where we can really take things forward because we are just activists. We don't have an EU official who look like us who can take this thing behind closed door and push it forward. That's why it would be really important to have an EU anti-racism coordinator in a third country who can take this kind of the issue forward. And I think that is something that we would like and get your support to push this kind of agenda forward. And it's really needed. And at a time where racism, far right racial tension are kind of creating division, it's the time that we need to come together, and we cannot do this alone. It's really important that EU citizens who don't look like us understand that we need them to work with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Achi. It's sobering what you've told us. First of all, I'm so sorry we can't see you. The irony was when we did the check, 20 minutes ago, I could see you, and now we can't. But we've heard what you've said. It's powerful. Well done for the advances you've made, but you can see, we can hear that there is a long way to go. And all we can do, what we can do, is to work to further your aim, keep the dialogue, and pick up that flag and carry it further. So one of the aims of events like this is to air, broadcast, and make sure more people know the issues you're facing, what you've achieved. Thank you. I'm sure there'll be questions. And now I'm going to the next speaker, Leo Capella. And just by a brief introduction, Leo is an autistic committee member for London for Europe, City, and East London for Europe. He's also a member of the Diversity Committee that I chair. And as well as, among other things, he's the joker in the pack. Leo, you have the floor.
Greetings, perfectly suspecting victims of fellow Martians. Thank you for spending part of your evening with us tonight. And before I start off, actually, I'd like to say, firstly, okay, that was a great speech. I can't swear, otherwise I'd incur the wrath of a lot of European movement powers that be. But actually, you really talked about the problems and also the reason for actually having that vision of inclusion and why we need to really push for it more than ever. So I just wanted to say that really off the bat. Huge respect to you. Okay, so I'm Leo. I'm here, apart from my EM Diversity Committee hat, I'm actually here strictly in my own personal capacity. I do a great many different things across the scene, but if I tried to say I was in anything other than an European movement UK capacity, I would be eaten like venom in a bad mood. So I hope that's a clear enough disclaimer for anyone watching. Now, actually, my work on the Diversity Committee, we're actually a group of people from different backgrounds, including disabilities, ethnic minorities, women. I could go on, but actually we meet together about roughly once every month or so to actually do things like review committees, review sort of the accessibility guide for accessible events, which I'd urge you to look it up. And actually, he would also contribute to policy and also a sort of speakers forum, which I'm sure Barbara will talk about a bit more when she sums up. But I would say actually do, this is more for members, but if you get the chance to do it for an event you're hosting, please do it. And actually, aside from other things, did it work? Did you see what I did here? Because actually, I responded sometimes in my sort of best way, which is actually sometimes to make a waspish comment or actually constructive comment in the text box. So really, this is inclusion in action. Something we can do, something that we can all do better, and something that we are actually in a really hard place right now on because of reform, because of the pushback generally against diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion, and actually the European Union essence of being united in diversity is needed now more than ever. I have a lot of reasons for supporting in Britain developing closer ties with the European Union and hopefully rejoining it, hopefully in the not too distant future. Now, they are more general reasons. I believe that actually the basic vision of inclusion for the European Union is actually good. A continent being able to travel, meet with other people, solve common problems together from whatever our background, whether we're neurodivergent, disabled, the two go hand in hand, or actually from any other minority. I'm actually sort of third generation Anglo-Italian. So there you go. Nice to see all the people coming in from their diverse locations in the chat, by the way. So really, but when it comes to the European Union from the disability context, from being disabled, I have a funny sort of thing about it. Because on one hand, it can be seen through a bit of a haze, so to speak. Because when the referendum was happening, there wasn't much talk in disability circles around Britain leaving the European Union, even though for my own passion, I was in favour of us remaining. There were odd efforts, but they didn't amount to something. And I also have the face to respond fact that actually a majority of disabled people according to one randomly sampled poll by the Patworth Trust, actually voted to leave the European Union. That was 54%. Unfortunately, the poll itself has disappeared into the sand of time. But so I can't follow up with the other thing, but that statistic enough should actually concern us. Because actually, in many ways, the European Union has a lot to, and of course I'll come back to that later, but actually, of course, there are a lot of things to like about the whole European Union. Freedom of movement, the sort of chance to solve problems, including on access with the new Accessibility Act for other, which could actually do, and speaking personally, a great deal around certain things, although I'm a layperson, and actually, Dace, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say on this, if anything. We'll have to wait and see how it influences things in the UK, and in the European Union. But it can be shrouded in a cloud of mist. And that's why I'm feeling a bit lightweight tonight, because sometimes the sort of essence of diversity can be sort of seen as remote, even from here. And actually, I can toss a link into that in the chat box once I'm done. And Joe, and actually also the European, but it can also seem unclear. I'm being a bit hazy with my own talking tonight, but actually looking at the European Union website, looking at some, there's limited, I wouldn't say it's non-existent, use of easy read, which means that actually things that should be actually be able to discuss in a care home, or even as one of my fellow committee members would put it, or in actually a group home or even a special school. You are not able to, which is a pity. The Erasmus does help actually with, apparently does help with special schools. So basically, it has to be the version of vision of inclusion has to be made much more clearer cut and much more piercing. In that actually it has to be communicated through different organizations in a clearer way, including in something at sometimes things that can actually be seen including disability charities. So generally speaking, it also had to be clear that there's space for co-production and space for people like me to, as autistic or neurodivergent, to be ourselves in the European Union. For instance, on a sort of, I'm going to tack a bit, but actually, for example, the European Convention on Human Rights doesn't specifically mention disability. We're mentioned as another status, but actually, if there were any reforms of it, it would actually be something really important. And that could actually be combined with actually a commitment to consulting with disabled people as not just when appropriate, but as an equal thought in anything to do with being actually human. Because it is about really that real inclusion that cuts through, that's part of our day-to-day lives. So because actually, according to the European Union's own website, only half of disabled people are employed compared to about 75%, and 28.4% of disabled people are at risk of poverty or social exclusion compared to 17.8% of disabled people, and 52% of disabled people feel discriminated against. So really, I'm talking from my own minority's perspective, but actually, really, how can we sort of be sort of part of a union that has a long way to go? And really, so it's about saying, yeah, I'm passionate about the European Union tonight, but I also want to see it do better. And I think Achi wants to see it do better and I think the whole panel will want to see it do better. It's about having an eyes wide open appreciation. And put it this way, because the situation right now is we could do with an ally sort of thing in these, and I'm going to finish shortly. We could do with a really strong ally, so to speak, and actually on the sort of whether it's stopping it speaking up against RFK over his comment over his weird and wonderful theories about autism, or actually taking us on to be able to deal with our human exercise our rights and being able to go across Europe equally and being supported equally on a day-to-day basis. Anyway, thanks for your time and hope you have a nice evening.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you for reminding us of the stats, of the numbers, of the, your numbers hide the fact that there are thousands of people who are not experiencing equality, who are not experiencing what we would like them to experience, how they get sidelined, how they get ignored, how they get diminished. The more we talk about these things, people talk, what's it? Transparency. The more we make this transparent, the more we highlight problems of accessibility, the more we talk about the guide that we have produced, that we have updated, for our events, so that whenever we're having any sort of activity, the European movement, we need to consider all the possible people that will come, not just here's the door, come in. We need this small event, I hope, will make a seed, plant a seed for European movement to develop in a more conscious way our awareness and how we relate to people with disabilities, whatever we want, whatever label is being put on them for that day. So thank you. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. I'm now going to switch now to Dace's talk, and I would like to explain. Dace Lazdina is the Policy, Communications and Research Officer at the Irish National Advocacy Service for People with Disabilities in Dublin. Dace was born in Latvia and has lived in Ireland for the last free and social work with a qualification in education and a master's degree in education obtained in Latvia. And she became a school social worker and a lecturer at the University of Latvia, and she was the first wheelchair user to have that profession. Last year, Dace finished her second master's degree, an MSc in Public Policy at Dublin City University. Her thesis was on overcoming the gap between the third education and employment for disabled people in Ireland. Now, just so you know, Dace's speech was pre-recorded because we weren't sure whether, due to pressing work issues, whether she would make it on time. She is here, and her contribution, just so that you know, is in two sections. First of all, presenting her research, and then highlighting the recommendations she made from it. There'll be opportunities for questions for you afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am happy to be here and share my ideas with you. According to the most recent statistics, disability affects nearly 1.3 billion individuals, which is approximately 16% of the global population, or 1 in 6 of us. The population of Ireland was 4.7 million in 2016, and the 2022 census revealed that Ireland's population increased to 5.16 million. Thus, this figure expected to reach approximately 6 million by 2026. And here is a table we can see and compare how people with and without disabilities are involved in employment and how many of them actually are unemployed. The labor force participation rate for individuals aged 20 to 64 is 82.3% of those without disability and 49.7% for those with disability. This implies that 60% of individuals aged 20 to 64 who have disability are not employed. In stark contrast, we have 18% of individuals without disability who are not employed. Upon examining the rate of work, the number of individuals employed divided by the total population, it is evident that more than 120,000 individuals with disabilities are employed. We can account for 56% of populations of individuals with disabilities. If we consider individuals who are not disabled, the number of employed individuals is 72.8% of relevant population. Individuals with disabilities operate at half the rate of their non-disabled counterparts. In 2016, disability employment gap was 36.3 percentage points, which is equivalent to 32.8 minus 36.5%. And more than 43,000 disabled people are currently unemployed, including those who are seeking their first regular job. Consequently, the unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities is 26.6%, while it is 11.5% of those with disabilities. This is 2.3 times the rate of individuals with disabilities in comparison to those without disability. Individuals with disability are considerably less inclined to participate in the labor force. Nevertheless, they are more likely to be unemployed than individuals without disabilities once they even enter the labor force. The main employment barriers for disabled people, despite the legislative measures in Ireland designed to promote equality, disabled individuals with higher qualifications still face significant barriers for employment. Although the percentage of individuals with disabilities who have completed a third level education has increased from 2.6% for 4.5% in both victims, only 36.5% of disabled individuals in Ireland have participation in the labour market, which is the lowest rate among all European Union countries compared to 61.4% of the general population. In comparison of the general population in Ireland and the people with disabilities residing in other advanced countries, which phenomenon leads to hatred and persistent poverty levels and diminishing employment rates. Additionally, this trend suggests that our society is depriving certain members of our community of the full potential and abilities they possess. Information between challenges faced by individuals with disabilities in Ireland in obtaining and maintaining employment and the experience of destitution and diversity is substantial, as we can see from the Department of Social Protection. Thus, unemployment is one of the most significant concerns of disabled people in Ireland. During my studies for my master's degree in public policy, I conducted research interviewing 98 disabled people who have studied at 10 level education institutions on Earth Island in the past 3 years. The research underscores the urgent need for more inclusive approach to supporting disabled people in achieving meaningful employment and participating fully in society. The research identified 4 main obstacles for disabled people. First, lack of support in securing employment post-education. Second, persistent unconscious bias and covert discrimination in hiring practices. Third, overly complex competition with non-disabled job applicants. And finally, concerns about losing social entitlement when entering the workforce. And my solutions I authored were as follows. To address the first issue, I suggest implementing a transition year with guaranteed placements for disabled students. This includes appointing early consultants, dedication on disabled students in higher education institutions to assist with job applications, CV writing, and networking with willing employers. Obeying the second motion, I propose arising disability awareness in workplaces, highlighting disabled people's capabilities, organizing mandatory training for all employers about the grants and other benefits available when hiring a disabled employee and availing a probation period to give a disabled person to prove their capabilities instead of rejecting them in the application or interview stage instantly. Reduce circumstance as they can introducing quotas for disabled people in every workplace where they compete for a position within themselves rather than in non-disabled candidates who are often intentionally or unintentionally prioritized by employers. There still could be a case, for example, when employers choose somebody with invisible disability rather somebody than in wheelchair. But still, that competition would be more fair and more accessible. To remove final obstacles, I recommend policy changes to ensure that the disabled individuals retain essential social benefits regardless of their employment status or income level, as they don't stop being disabled and having additional needs, even if they are capable of working full time. At first glance, it may seem that the government would lose money in this way, paying for those who are working already. However, in the long term, the government will gain it by significantly raising disabled people's employment rate and by the taxes they will pay. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dace, very much for that really detailed, specific analysis of the problems specifically facing disabled people in Ireland, and for your very practical recommendations for solutions. Now, time is short, so what I'd like to do is bring everybody back on screen, and particularly as we can now see Achi, and then I'm waiting for a question from the floor. So just to clarify the question, I'm just looking through them now. Okay. Here's Gail's question. Does Ireland, this is obviously for Dace, does Ireland share the same issues as the UK in terms of accessing reasonable adjustments within reasonable timeframes to allow people to be in and remain in work? Dace, over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very happy to be here and meet you all in person. I think the issues are quite similar to what's happening in Ireland and the UK, because the system of education and getting to employment is quite similar in both countries. I think the main problem is that we very often don't let people who are not disabled to see and understand how capable actually people with disabilities are and how much they could bring into society if they could stay in employment, and how much gain it would be for everybody. I think it's the same issue in both countries. And also, I think about reasonable accommodations. If we are talking about reasonable accommodations, the problem here is that reasonable accommodations are used in Ireland, I think in the UK the same way. How you are looked against the other people without disabilities, not the actual needs for people with disabilities, but for example, not to make them somehow better or in higher positions than non-disabled people, but non-disabled people already still are in higher and better position. And for example, if somebody is typing slow and we give them only 20, let's say 15 minutes more for typing than usual, it's not helping. We should look for the individual needs, particularly for each person. That will be much more better than trying to compilation doing between either somebody privileged or not.
Thank you. Okay, that's. I'm just going to say one thing. Ireland's lucky to have you. That's all I can say. You know, they're very lucky to have you. Do we have another question, please?
You.
I'm just waiting for one to come up. This is a question for Achi, who we can now see. With the EU Parliament liaison, are you making cases for minorities throughout the EU 27, or are you just covering UK issues? Great question, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for the question. No, we are not making the case for EU citizens or for minority across the 27 countries. The case we're making is for minority citizen in outside of 27 countries. So, because we know that things are really, really difficult for EU citizens outside, because EU citizens outside the UK, outside the EU, do not have a framework to engage with the European Union. So, what we're trying to do is to create a new mechanism, which we have done with the EU delegation in the UK, and this is a groundbreaking mechanism we have established. So what we would like to do is to replicate that in 142 countries, and this is a really big ambition, I would say. But the reason why we want to reach out to these countries is because they have the EU External Action Service in these countries, and these EU citizens outside the EU outside the EU countries do not have this mechanism in place. But those who are already in the 27 countries, they already have the whole EU mechanism to support them. So we are really focused on those who are EU citizens from minority background outside EU countries.
Thank you. That's really helpful. That's a big task, Achi. I noticed that every speaker tonight, I would say with our three speakers, we have people taking on big challenges, but I can see they're big enough to surmount them, but thank you. All right, can I have the next question, please? This is right. Now, who are we going to give this to? Well, let's give this one to Leo, as he hasn't answered yet. From Rob Rimmel, thank you. How are we to deal with America, where, with Trump's guidance, the Accessibility Act will be regarded as left-wing revolution and woke fake news? Over to you, Leo.
Ooh, we have had a lot of unpleasant stuff from America on disability, haven't we? Whether it's Trump going for disabled air traffic controllers, I believe, or Robert F. Kennedy thinking about what weird and wonderful things to actually connect autism with, instead of actually really listening to autistic people and families who could do with this stuff like a hole in the head. But I think on pushing back on that, I think we need to really make sure that actually we're doing in the UK, we're doing what we can, and actually making sure, and I'll come on to actually Gail's question, as I think it ties in with this, that we're actually making sure that we are having effective control as well as effective co-production. Two, I think it's about building links. And this is easier said than done. I know there are quite a few pan-disability organizations. I urge people to look up the European Network on Independent Living, or ENIL, which actually campaigned across pan-disability issues in Europe. For autism, actually a sort of grouping or federation of autism organizations exist in Autism or Autism Europe, excuse my lousy pronunciation. And I think it's important that actually from outside we actually really join up and see what solution and where we can push together. Remember, Europe, and I think that Daisy can speak about this, actually isn't always the best on sort of on issues. For example, with employment, a lot of European countries prefer sort of sheltered institutions and use of institutions and trying to get away from, rather than community living, and actually sheltered working rather than being out in the community, and actually the use of where there are organizations, making them genuine cooperatives. I'm happy to stand to be corrected on this here or afterwards, but I think we've got to do that. And secondly, we've got to think about where we can make our voices heard on diversity issues, and actually more pushing, more conversing, and how do we get the forums to do that? So Gail, tying into your question now, I think it's not just giving a say, it's giving control. Not just when things are done in the form of co-production, but when things are actively implemented. The crises we're seeing around welfare and around the sort of rise of populism is because in part people don't have I think there is a sort of don't have control. And that's because sometimes the amount of control is obscured. For instance, sort of how do we actually have the institutions or organizations to discuss things and make sure that we make the global or continental in the form of the European Union actually on the local level, and really thinking how can we make sure that whether at parliamentary level, whether it's the UK Parliament or that kind of thing, that we're actually enabling people to access the corridors of power effectively. For example, and I'm not sure about this in the European Parliament, I did try to look, but in the pandemic, a lot of Parliament opened up and actually said you could access it remotely. Great for disabled people. But actually, when the pandemic reduced a lot of things, and there is a certain politician, UK politician, who I'd like to issue a very sarcastic thank you to on that note, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who actually sort of turned the clock back and meant that in some chambers we couldn't sit there. So really, I think it's a combination of those things. I could go on, but we're running out of time. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Leo. We are running out of time. Oh, there's one more question, but I don't know if we can extend a little bit. It's a question for Dace from Joe Pye. Are there equivalent figures obtainable for the UK or any EU 27 countries? I assume by equivalent she means as opposed to what we've heard from Ireland. We just need a yes.
There should be more in-depth research done to compare data between other UK countries. It could be my next step, what I could do. For now, I can say that, for example, the gap between education and work in Ireland is the lowest between all the other European countries. That's why it is a so important question in Ireland. But it's, of course, there could be higher percentage in every UA country and also UK country. It's not ideal in any of them, so there is still a long way to go.
Thanks. Yes, I think there's a long way to go on a lot of fronts, aren't there? I think one of the things has really been highlighted by all three of our excellent speakers are the challenges, are the disadvantages that they have highlighted, that they personally have faced, and the people that they represent face. I'm really thrilled we've had this event. It's a very small event. I would like to hope that this is the seed for something that can get European movement members out there to expand our understanding of what membership of European movement means. It means that we are inclusive. The EU's vision of inclusion is important for here in the UK. We're not in the EU. We want to get back. We want to rejoin, and we will rejoin. We can add mojo to our movement by encouraging people who might be perceived as disadvantaged, but we won't be perceiving them as disadvantaged. So that's what we have to do. Let's everybody here tonight really work to just open their antennae and their awareness, having learned so much about all the disadvantages that people are facing, whether it's heritage, whether it's culture, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, all these disadvantages. But it is our job as a very powerful, strong group of people, which you all are, as exemplified by our three speakers tonight, to take this forward. I want to thank you all. I can't do justice to all that you've said, so I'm just going to thank everyone for joining us. And obviously, this is just a very small step. Thank you once again. And well, good night, everybody.